Hello and welcome to the Weshtern Philosophy Podcast. Two friends with oceans and oceans discussing the unseen forces in our lives through the lens of music, mystery, and crack. We have a Patreon at Weshtern Philosophy Pod. Don't forget the H. If you're enjoying the show and would like to see it grow, you can join this or make a one-stop donation via the Ko-fi link, both in the show notes below. Our guest today is the multi-faceted Brighid Bennett, former teacher, current breathworker and practitioner in both Tibetan Buddhist and South American healing lineages, who sat down to speak with us about the topic of authenticity.
Yeah, I think every time we expand into more love, because it's more truth, there's a grieving process for all the times that we weren't. And I think, anytime we transform, a different version of us kind of dies or we let go of. So grief is always parallel with transformation, with more love, more truth, more ourselves. It's like there's such a paradox that we live in.
That's a tick he has. I don't know why he does that.
Clapping?
I'm just clearing the space, Bart.
Oh, that's nice.
Energetically, sonically, spiritually, and Are we all present? Accounted for?
Do you guys set intentions for the podcast?
I'm feeling the lack of intention creeping in now.
I've never been less prepared. Not that we ever prepare.
You've been less prepared.
But
I can...
You are... Oh no, I said I wasn't going to swear as much on this season because my kids have been giving up. And I was nearly already dropping the big one there.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Second sentence. Might be a record.
I'll try it.
Yeah. So the intention for the podcast might just be less swearing, Brighid, but we'll probably break that
That's
one.
my personal intention.
Okay.
Well,
I'll set an intention for this one that we can,
Lovely.
It
Please.
can just be everyone gets what they need from it, of benefit for all beings, and for us three as well.
Oh, that's lovely.
That is
so
beautiful.
we'll just trust whatever comes through is just what's meant to.
Yes, we're just manifesting the intention.
You nailed
I
it.
like that.
I think we might have to steal that one for every.
Yeah, why not?
Well, thank you, Brighid. And actually, I think that intention setting is like the nicest introduction somebody can get to you. So I think they're already getting an idea of who you are. But to do the more boring, label-y kind of stuff, I want to say welcome to our guest, Brighid Bennett, former teacher, a practitioner in both Tibetan Buddhist and kind of South American healing lineages, a breathworker, a person who is working at the Buddhist Centre at Ojinbara down in West Cork, and a friend of mine from the Omega Centre in upstate New York. And we're really happy to have you here, Brighid, with all your skills and all your facets and all your attributes. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's nice to be in Clare.
Well, you have a connection here as well, don't you?
Yes. My mother's mother she was born and raised in East Clare in Whitegate, and then moved to New York where she had my mom. So,
and as we always say, East Clare is the real hardcore magic part of Clare. Like all of Clare is magic, but I think there's something about East Clare in particular, which is because you're not far from Biddy Early country as well.
Yeah. We went down to her cottage actually a couple of years ago. But even just everywhere there in the land, it's just really, you can feel something, in the spirit of the people. Mm-hmm. I remember going by the church and like all the hurls outside and the kids, and just there's such a way of being there that's really strong. Mm-hmm. People just kind of embody the land. There's a lot of connection. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love Clare.
Thoughts, Bart? Do you love Clare? You're just sitting there smiling, and I can't, we can't communicate that in audio media. You've got a beautiful smile on your face. You're like, you could listen to somebody compliment Clare all day, obviously, but I'd love you to contribute as well. We'll come back to you.
Well, listen, if I can't swear, who am I really?
Nothing left to say.
No, I think what happened was I was going to be the stable person this season. I wasn't just going to be Anthony's emotional friend while he's being wise. No, I think it was something. Brighid was at our session in Potogans yesterday, and said something about, we were talking briefly about ego, and I was just really thinking about that. I don't even know exactly what you said, but in some way it resonated with me. And then when you set that intention as well, of just like that, it'll be what'll be nice. Well, not nice, it's such a horrible word, but like that it'll be whatever it needs to be, and that what needs to come true will come true. And I was kind of like, nothing really to add at this point. I had a small ego moment where I thought, North Clare, I need to stand up for North Clare. And then I thought, yeah, let that part go. You know, when Anthony says, no, the real magic in East Clare, I'm like, fucking, I'll fight him. And I was like, that's probably not the right. So I was just joyously being. But thanks for cutting that off anyway.
You can joyously be on your own time. Right now, you need to perform.
I need to produce content.
That's it. It's all about content.
Just presence. Just be with us. That's all.
I'm here, smiling. And the sun's come out.
Yeah.
Spring is here. Brighid, hello. The funny thing is, no, I said before this, like, I've never come more, or I just said, like, hardly ever come less prepared. I know very little about you apart from good vibes. So, how are you here?
How am I here? Yeah, well, I would say, I mean, I was kind of telling you earlier, I was a teacher. I lived a very regular life. I was very mainstream, grew up in New York, with Irish parents, so Irish culture, but became a teacher, you know, was in a stable relationship, had a house, all the things. And yeah, the end of my 20s, around 29, I was just feeling like, okay, this is everything they all told me to do. I'm being a good woman the way I was conditioned, what that means. And I like this person I'm with. I like the house. My job's all right. But it was just like this is not my life kind of feeling, or like something's missing, something's empty. It was like I didn't feel fully alive. I wasn't necessarily sad or a certain thing, but there was like a dullness of like, I don't really feel the sun in the morning. I don't really taste my food that much. I'm just kind of like going through the motions. So I kind of bit by bit let it all go. So first the relationship ended. Then COVID hit and I was living in an apartment in New York City. So that pushed me to like get rid of the apartment, just gave it up at the end of 2020 and booked a one-way to Guatemala. And yeah, I met this Mayan woman who's a healer who works with the Temazcal, and we just clicked, connected. She spoke a little bit of Spanish because she grew up speaking her Mayan dialect in her village, and I had a little bit of Spanish from New York streets. But we would just go into this Temazcal, and she was teaching me so much about the elements and the earth, and we didn't really need words so much, what she was transmitting and sharing. So things shifted in me. So I was there for 3 months because that's how long the visa was. And I met a lot of really fascinating people who were just living different lives. And I was just like, the how was wrecking my head. Like, I want that. I want to just be here. I was still working online, doing all my stuff on the computer. So I'd be like in the Temazcal with her for a day. And the next day I'm on Zoom meetings talking about logistics and, you know, stuff for the company I was working in, providing workshops for teachers around New York City. So I was like in and out of two worlds. And
what is a Temazcal? Sorry.
It's like a what in the Native American tradition, do you remember the name? It's like a little hut, almost like it looks like an igloo from the outside, but it's stones, and they put in smoke and steam in there, so it's like it's almost like walking into a little womb. Like you went to this very dark cave-like, womb-like space.
So is it like a sweat lodge type deal?
Yeah, sweat lodge. That was the word I was trying to come up with.
Yeah, and there is a Native American term. It's actually in Serpent of Light, but I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, it's basically like a little sweat lodge, but it's really set up with the cardinal directions and in a really intentional way, which I don't know all about. I just connected with this woman for 3 months where I got to fully experience it with her, but in no way, you know, I'm not any expert on that. But yeah, so something really shifted there. I think really connecting to the elements and the earth, and so myself in a different way. And then when I got back to New York, I left my job kind of spontaneously. My body was just like, every time I opened the computer to do my work, I would get headaches and stomach aches. But the second I put it down and go on a walk, so I'd be like, oh, I have to call in sick work today, is how I'd be thinking. But then the second I walked away from the work, then I was fine. So it's like, I'm not actually sick. I'm having a reaction to the... So I was just on a call with my manager one day, and it just came out. Like, she was asking me about certain deadlines. I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing any of that. She's like, okay, you're having it. Is it on your calendar for next week? I was like, no. it's not happening.
It's not getting done.
And so the next day she was like, okay, I guess we need a resignation letter. And I was like, what? And she was like, Brighid, you're done. Like, I heard you, you're done. And so it was very spontaneous. And I was like, what will I do? And I ended up booking a one-way to Ireland. That was in 2021. I thought I'd be here for a couple of weeks. And then within the first couple of days, a friend was like, actually, I have an apartment for you in Dublin that's available. All the aunts and uncles and cousins from Clare, Kilkenny, Galway, everyone was like, oh, you're here. Come over, stop. We'll pick you up. Let's do this. We'll go up to Crowpatcher. We'll do these things. Because I just had space and time and openness. And I was really like, after I left the job, I kind of, made a pact with the universe, I guess you could say. Like, obviously I'm not supposed to be doing that because it's so physically uncomfortable, but I have no idea what am I supposed to do in this world? Why am I here? What am I doing? So the journey kind of started there of like, I'm just here to be of service. Like, show me how I can kind of be of service to all the beings by sharing whatever I have, whatever comes through this. Yeah, whatever my story is, whatever gifts, talents, interests, things that I have, how do I use that? And so it started in Ireland, and this land is so magic. And I heard so many stories about my grandmother, even my dad growing up. He didn't tell me many stories. He's from Roscommon, but I learned a lot. Just being in the land and hearing from people who knew him growing up, so a lot opened and shifted, and then that just continued the journey so that I would intuitively feel. So after Ireland, I felt Mexico calling me. So I spent the start of 2022 there. While I was there, I was working with another older Mexican woman who is also a healer, very much like divine feminine. She spends most of her year in Amazashram in India. And then I was just feeling this call to the Himalayas. So I booked a one-way there. And the first day I landed, I met the Dalai Lama and got teachings, and then kind of ended up. So this is, so what am I doing here? I don't know. After I spent a year and a half in the Himalayas, I thought it would be like a few weeks, but life just kept opening. And then Mexico called me back. It was very clear. Then I felt drawn to Omega Institute. That's where I met Anthony. And I think I was saying it to you even there, like, I don't know what's going to happen after Omega, but I feel like I'm going to be in Ireland. Yeah. But I didn't know why or how or where, like, I didn't know any of the details. So I just kind of let it go. And about like the end of October, I just got this really strong feeling I had to go visit this center in West Cork because one of my teachers from the Himalayas was going there. So I was like, okay, someone I met in India and have a connection with is going to Ireland. Two worlds coming together, I have to be there. So I booked a flight over for a week-long retreat, and then I just asked them at the end of the week, like, I want to stay. Do you need help? Can I be of service here? And yeah, they agreed. So I'm still there. And that's kind of how I've gotten. The long-winded story of how I got to this moment is just following these little intuitive bits.
That was brilliant. And do you feel that, have you any sense of where you are on the journey? Is it like, does it feel like, oh, I've just started out? Or have you felt like, oh, I feel a bit more clarity than compared to the COVID times when you quit your job and everything?
I guess it depends which journey. Like now that I understand spiritual lineages, I'm like, oh, I'm beginner. Like, you know, I've sat with some of the greatest masters in the Himalayas, like to just see what is possible, human potential. I'm quite blown away by a lot of the people I've met and just their ways of being. So in that sense, I feel like a total, complete beginner. In terms of just being more at home with myself, I can feel a difference, I would say, from where I was when I just said kind of like, I don't know what I want, but this is not it. That moment, I felt very like, who am I?
Yeah, I suppose even when you started answering there, I was like, it's a bit of a silly question, but I meant it more like, how's your comfort with it, I suppose.
That shifted a lot. Yeah, because the funny thing about journey, you know, I don't know, I guess I used to think you go from here to there in kind of a linear way, and now I'm realizing that's actually not. And
you're only being in the moment and following the next step, exactly. So it's like, I don't know how many steps
I don't really feel like I'm going anywhere in particular or want to go anywhere, but it's just like, I'm just here. I'm just being, and life's gonna, I mean, who knows, you know? Tomorrow I could end up with some corporate job if the causes and conditions could arise that's just what happens, and I'd, roll with it as long as it feels true. And so I think that's always, what feels true for us is always shifting, I guess. But what I would say is I think feeling at home in myself has shifted. You know, I think a little bit I was probably searching at the beginning of like, where am I supposed to be and what am I supposed to do? Mm-hmm. And it was so much about output. And now I'm like, okay, it's really just about being.
Yeah.
I even love this quote by Rick Rubin. I don't know if you've read his book, The Creative Act. He was, I think he was a music producer, but he set out to write a book about what makes everyone. He worked with the greatest, musicians, artists. Yep. So he's writing a book about like how to make great art. And the book is called The Creative Act, and it's just on being. And he says, being an artist is never about output. It's about your way of relating to the world. And that really sticks with me. Is like, that's enough. How we relate to the world, like what we internally embody, and the way I show up for a person, or the way I interact with the land, or if it's my responsibility to hold a space or my responsibility to be a participant, how well do I hold that, giving or receiving, or just being is enough, really.
I'm noticing it's very easy to be present around you. It's your very, I'm just because I'm just realizing just now that quite often I will do a little bit of a thing before the podcast. If I'm like, okay, let's maybe close some of this shit off, but allow for my higher self to come true or something like that. And with you, I'm just sitting there going, it's very joyful. I don't know if that'll be particularly interesting to listen to if I'm just sitting here smiling, but
No, it's very true. We went to St. Flannan's Well yesterday, nice. St. Flannan's Well and Unusual Tree, and which is historically like a pagan sacred site, and then there's a holy well there now, and they still hold masses there, I think, once a week. But if you don't mind me sharing, Brighid, like we brought you along, and Brighid just kind of wandered off into the trees and then just came back, and you just kind of sat down on your haunches, and it was so calm. Like there's a certain type of active stillness. Not active is the wrong word. Alive stillness. It's not the feeling of doing nothing, but there's for me, I call it the power of the void, the power of space. Like the power, like you talk about holding space, and it seems like a lot of your journey has been about creating space to allow new things to come in. And that's certainly something I've been kind of struggling with in the last couple of years, is like, okay, you maybe recognize a couple of things that aren't fitting so well in your life. Like, okay. And the way we're taught is like, improve those things or replace those things. Yeah. But actually sometimes you just need to take them out and leave a void, leave a space there. And I think as mind-focused creatures, we don't like a vacuum. You're like, let's just remove my job, Yeah. And that void that's left there can be very uncomfortable. But if you can sit with that, stillness, then really, really wonderful stuff can come in, can fill it. Do you find a connection between the kind of meditative stillness and the kind of attitude you're moving through your life with at the moment?
Yeah, I love that word, like the void. And I think sometimes even people, like when I was trying to describe the Temescal to you, that's what that is. It's like a womb, a voided dark space where there's empty space. There's not nothing there. There's like limitless potential and possibility. Yeah. And I think often we fill our lives with so much stuff, like we can't even sit at a table without having to fill it with words. Or our day, it's like, I have an hour, what else can I do? Or when you're constantly filling it, there's no space for new things or creation or magic to come in. And I think like the thing about that void, it's always there. We always all have access to it. Just that kind of limitless space of limitless potential maybe. But we're so scared of it because it is really scary. It's like a kind of edge, like the moment I just let go of the job or let go of things, it was like, my nerve system at first, I remember how it felt of like, am I really doing this? What am I doing? Okay, let's just book but always what brought me back is everywhere I went, I was just really connecting with the land. Like feet on the earth, like get out of, when I could just get out of my head, drop out. It's all these narratives. And when I started paying attention, like meditation has really opened a lot for me of realizing like, that's like something my mom would say. That sounds like my first grade teacher. That sounds like that person on Instagram who I watch too much of. I've actually deleted all social media at this point because I got to a point where it was like, the more I really got into meditating, like dedicating a portion of my life where most of my day was, being at the beach, doing yoga, meditating, I realized how many other voices were in my head, and they're influencing how I look at myself, how I look at the world. So yes, meditation practice is great, and actually just making changes in my day-to-day life of like, I don't need to be in so much contact with these people, or I don't need to spend my time on Instagram. Actually, there's not really anything for me there other than neurosis. It's just inflaming the neurosis I already have. So
100%. And that ties into breathwork then, I suppose, as well, because I've found really with a lot of the Wim Hof breathing and all that kind of sort of stuff, when you have the moment where you stop breathing and you're actually maybe not breathing for 2 minutes or something, that to me feels like you're kind of going into the void a little bit, you're kind of feeling that death space, but it's not empty. I think our fear is that it's empty, but it's actually not empty. And this kind of ties into when we did our last episode of the last season, and we were silent for a good bit of it.
First 20-25 minutes.
And how partly that's uncomfortable, but also it made you really realize how alive even that is.
It was a cool way to get to know you as well, because we've done quite a few podcasts and we have a routine. Bart knocks on the door, comes in, and we set up and we chat and the mics go up, and we are into that routine. But this one we didn't talk. Like Bart knocked on the door and we agreed beforehand there would be no words at all. And so like you were petting Blarney, we were getting the coffee together and stuff. And it was interesting because it also, people normally, the podcast starts for our listeners when we say hello, right? But the podcast starts for us really when you knock on that door. So they got that preamble bit. And then we got to sit down here together, and we didn't know what the two of us would do. And I kind of meditated for a bit, and you did some of your Reiki practice. And then we talked a bit.
Guitar a little bit, and then we did talk,
Yeah, at the end. But it was and I remember going into it, there was a bit of like, but what will we do? What will it look like? What will it sound like? What will it... And I don't know if it was an interesting episode or not. I'm quite happy we did it, because it was different, at least. And it was my little nod to John Cage. But, yeah.
My wife Yvonne said she would have loved for it to go on longer.
Really?
Bit. Yeah, she's like,
maybe she just hates the podcast.
No, she just wants me to shut up. But
subtle hints.
Yeah.
But that part was nice.
It was really nice to hear you just breathing and not saying anything. I'm really finding it at this moment in my own life that it's a real time of transition, especially with work and purpose and that kind of stuff. And I've done a transition like that once before, and it isn't necessarily at the deep spiritual level that you're describing, where you're actually really going into spiritual practices, but it's kind of the second time in my life where I'm trying to do something, just a leap of faith kind of thing, where you're like, ooh, the monkey mind really would love some more security here. The bank balance is getting awfully low. I have children to support, but the kind of gut or instinct is like exactly what you said there, sitting behind a computer going, nah, I'm done with this shit. It makes me tired. Like even just like sending invoices, which used to be quite joyful because you're like, yay, I'm getting paid. It's just be like, oh, so write an invoice. It takes 2 minutes, lads. It's nothing. But just the energy of like...
but that's your body talking to you,
yeah,
isn't it? It's not about the effort. It's about...
100%. But then you start... Well, I suppose what I was going to say is that the great thing of the practical application of that is that I remember from the last time that I was terrified, but that I also felt an excitement, and I went with that excitement, and it worked out beautifully. And I felt that excitement. In this moment, I was a bit more confused about it. But then I was talking to Anthony. He had a good few insights about it. He's very good at reflecting stuff back. And then I felt that excitement. I was like, oh, there we go. And then in a weird way, that can soothe that monkey mind as well, where you're like, we know this. We've done this scary thing before. I know that all sounds nearly like a cop-out, where you're actually maybe not committing to the process, but it's like you still have to interface with your incarnated self, the person who is scared and who has all those voices that are saying, no, don't do this, just scarcity,
And I think the nervous system we forget a lot too. That's what I've been noticing in my journey. Like it can really feel like death to get close to the unknown.
Yeah.
And from a nervous system perspective, it's like stopping us because like you might die if we go. We don't know what's going to happen there.
Exactly.
But the funny thing is, isn't that kind of just the reality of life?
Anyway,
we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen.
But we don't. We kind of agree to be in this state of a little bit distance from reality because we don't want to think about that all the time. That would also be a bit much, but it can also not be so. I think the more we practice just being with uncomfortable things, the more it becomes like, it feels like this, and I can be with that sensation.
Yeah, and you get more and more capacity. But I love feeling that flame of excitement, when it's like the part of the nervous system is going, oh God, no. But then there's another part which to me feels more like soul going, nudging you on, going, actually it's gonna be fucking brilliant.
Well,
just hold on.
I'd love to bring in the title of the episode because Bridget did come to us with a topic, and I think now
thank God.
Yes, I know. 25 minutes in, it's time to roll credits, and the topic was authenticity, and I think that can mean so many different things because I think authenticity can mean it can mean loads of things. It can mean like how you present to the world, what kind of work you do, and so on. But what I'm kind of picking up from you guys is maybe like this kind of quiet authenticity, the part of you that is not the monkey mind, that is not the job, that is not the external validation, the part of you that maybe is still there when you're in the void. Is that the authentic part? What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because I was watching you when you're saying that excitement in your body and you're pointing to your chest here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent some time in Mexico at a center called Hridaya, and they, the person who started it, the main teacher there, is a devotee to Ramana Maharshi, who's the one who does self-inquiry. Who am I? You sit in a lot of stillness and just ask, who am I? And he one of his instructions was center of the chest a little to the right, like focus here. That's where he had a lot of experiences of the truth of himself is, I guess, how he just, or how I'm regurgitating what he described, but they always had us focus on this part. And I often notice, when I'm getting wild in my head or the stories coming into my body, but often this heart space is where it feels like, that's where I feel like more authentic, or the version of me I want to live into and choose. Because to me, that's beyond, it just comes back to like, well, who am I here to serve? What do I offer to the people around me? Because in doing that, it's also serving me. I'm part of all beings, so it's like if I'm drawn to maybe do some writing or go on an adventure, but my mind is saying like, oh, but this and money and da-da-da. I feel like, when I come back to here, it's just putting another like coin in the piggy bank of like, I can choose, this is who I'm choosing, and communicating that to kind of the world. And then resources and things show up, like so many, the stuff that we worry about up here, it's not necessarily real. It's just these thoughts. No. Yeah. So to me, like choosing the authentic self is really coming into here. Still the ego part of me that's scared and embarrassed and worried about money and survive, it's still there. And it's just like, oh, okay, I can feel both. I could feel those voices and that scaredness. And I can feel kind of the truth of me, the center of me that's really just in my body and feeling all the sensations and just saying, okay, all these sensations are there and I'm going to choose to write the book or go on the trip or not go on the trip and just sit still and just do my day-to-day work at this center. I think it doesn't really matter what we choose. It's like, where are we coming from? Are we giving into the external voice, noise, expectations, how people perceive us? Or is it coming from this makes no sense, it's kind of weird, no one's going to understand me, but I know, I know that this is the next step for me. I think there's a real authenticity in that, I guess.
God, it's such a lot though. Like even when you said it there, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, maybe a little bit more to the right.
I don't know why he said
just feeding into it, and I'm like, such power. God, there's such power, like in a nice way, not in a manipulative way or whatever, just pure, like, there's so much energy there that I'm nearly like, it's nearly too, I need more capacity. I'm just realizing I need more capacity for that. Like, I like that feeling of just being in the world and then feeling that flame burning a little bit. But when I really tune into it, like, oh God, this is where stars are made of, in a way, And I don't mean me necessarily, but I mean that heart space, that consciousness, I suppose, that we all ultimately are. Yeah, that all didn't go through there at all, so I don't know. That doesn't really make sense.
I think you're literally speaking from the heart.
Yeah, I really speaking from the heart. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be a scary place.
Yeah.
Also, because there's a lot of unknown there.
Yeah.
There's no control. I feel like our mind tries to control the energies that come through, but when you just let it go, you have no idea where it's going to end you up.
Yeah, and it's a bit like, it reminds me a little bit of, we've had chats personally about anger, which obviously that's a very different thing than to what we're speaking to now, but it reminds me of that same thing where I think both me and Anthony have had experience where we're like, ooh, let's not tap into that too much because we might blow up the world. There's real something like, it's a bit like that, but then actually when you allow it more space, it actually, in a way, becomes more mellow, because part of that hugeness of it is you pushing it down.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's probably similar here, that it is the mind's trying to control it, that's creating the tension, whereas in itself it's just pure being.
The thing is, I think there are things that can guide you through the void, and myself and Katie were talking about manifestation the last day. Manifestation's a big thing at the moment. Manifest what you want. Manifest the car you want, the dress for the job you want, manifest the partner you want. And the funny thing about all those things is that they're smaller than you, right? Because you can only manifest something either the size of you or smaller, right? You can't manifest something you can't conceive of. But if you create a void and allow it to be filled, you can actually bring stuff into your life that's much bigger than you. Oh, yeah. And you've made reference to a couple of things, Brighid. You've referenced connection with land, and you've referenced like meditative practice. You've referenced like listening to the body. As we were talking earlier, you were saying how important lineage is as well. So there are guides. Like, it's not the rational mind. If you go into the void, there are actual guides there. There are actual systems of support that are very earthy. Because to me, like, the land and lineage and the body are incredibly tangible physical things, right? Like, they're very yin. They are of the earth. Whereas yang things would be astrology and the cycles of the planets and concepts and things like that. And those are very yang and to do with heaven and so on. So that's something I've always really appreciated about you, Brighid, is you are a very earthy person who is living a life based on different principles, but the phrase "away with the fairies" is coming in. You're not away with the fairies. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you have these grounding practices to support, and I think that's really important for people to hear, because like when you are creating the void, people are like, okay, I've gotten rid of the conscious mind and I've quit my job. There is still stuff there you can hold on to.
Yeah, and it feels like marrying the two. I think there's no coincidence that first I was taking to Ireland, to Mexico, places where I'm really in my body, really earthy, working with healers and herbs and just rolling around in the dirt, kind of like, in Ireland. That was my childhood here, was like running around the bales of hay and being on the farm. So that's when I came to Ireland. I didn't spend much time in the cities, or I wasn't interested in that. It was we cycled the Ring of Kerry, me and my friends, one weekend. We went out to Connemara and did hikes. We went up to the Hill of Tara, my friend, and just laid there and meditated for a while. A friend of mine who grew up in Ireland. And that really, grounded me and reminded me of just kind of, you don't take things too seriously when you're kind of just out in a patch of grass, rolling around or looking at a nice view. And then in Mexico it was the same. There's like a real playfulness and levity in the local people there. They have more that ocean-like quality, and I think grounding in that first, then it was like, okay, then I was ready for the Himalayas. Because sometimes being around some people who've been practicing their whole life and meditating, I don't know how to even describe it, how expanded their consciousness is, the levity, how active maybe the upper chakras are. I'm not huge on, like, I don't reference the chakras too much for myself, but I'll just use that lingo there for what they, like, what, you know, what being around their presence, what it kind of opened and activated in me of human potential, I guess, and almost just how much they could hold. Yeah, that's what I feel like. How far can I really go there? But they're just there all the time, you know, many of the great masters. And so I think having that first really strong connection to the body, to the earth, and just kind of, you know, I'll still be in the pub on a Friday night or, you know, having a real normalness, I guess, to then open to some of these higher spiritual practices. I think that's important for a lot of us coming from the West who didn't grow up in a monastery or somewhere where you're just grounded in that from birth. I think marrying the two is something that's really important. You know, I've heard people kind of reference things like heaven and earth, bringing them together. There was a healer who came to Omega and he called it like a taproots meditation, but it was very much about you kind of put your roots as far down into the earth as possible and then your branches as far up into the ethers and then bring them back together at the heart. And bringing those two together to me always feels like, maybe kind of a really nice offering to the world, like to bring in a lot of light and levity, but to be fully present with it here and not just like, you know, I used to do a thing where I'd go off to a meditation retreat or something and just be really in that zone. And then the retreat's over, drive home, and then I'm back doing my same old regular. You kind of let it go. And it's like, oh, that's just something I get to experience every now and again when I want to. I know how to go there. But it's a very different thing to say, okay, I want to integrate this every day or practice, you know, at least attempt to aspire to really integrate that presence and offer that to people, to whatever animals I come across, or if I'm cooking, to offer that into the food of just being, letting both come through, like bringing those higher states into kind of the regular mundane moments. I think it really takes that earthy.
What reminds me of the old Zen thing, isn't it? Before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water, you know?
I never really thought about it that way, that what they're doing over there in the Himalayas is in a way quite young, if I could say it like that. Like that it's kind of more unseen at university compared to the witches in Terry Pratchett, you know, and I appreciate
that.
But you put that really nicely, that I can see. Oh yeah, Mexico people, like, it's very spiritual, but it's with the land, and Ireland, it's with the land, and there is a lovely mundanity to it. That might not be the right word.
Yeah, but the everyday,
and kind of there's a great sense of mother, I suppose, to it. Whereas I don't know if I would say that in Himalayas is more father, but maybe it is then, you know. And I definitely feel that one of the most powerful things I've done as a practice recently for myself, which is the smallest thing, is just to stand out in my garden, really root into the earth, into the crystalline core, and really get the light from upstairs. And you just feel, when you feel that meet in yourself, you're like, oh yeah. And I just start either laughing or crying, you know. And then you're like, oh, this is where we are. This is kind of what we are in a way. This is we're trying to bridge the, I don't know if there's a gap between those worlds, but you know, where we're trying to bridge, if there is a gap, we're trying to bridge it. Yeah.
Well,
Bridget.
I know, and people have called me Bridge. I like that that visual, you know, bridging worlds. I think that's a cool thing, because we all have different inclinations in the world. Like, I know the family I grew up in, they wouldn't really be. That's just not what they're interested in. You know, my brothers were construction. They were happy to build homes for people and hand it on. And what I'm talking about, they're like, oh, that's cool. No further questions, you know? And that's fine. And so I think it's just what you're describing. I think, the best thing we can do, it kind of comes back to authenticity. Just like, know your role. Like, everyone is equally valuable. You know, 100%. The person who's working the land in any corner of the earth, the person who works at the post, like, we all need to send our mail. We need teachers. We need everything. And so just knowing your role. I think for me, I was trying to play the role of, I'm a school teacher, I'm very normal, I'm this. And it's like, there was always something underneath that was actually, there's other things for me that
I'm not normal.
Not even a little bit. I'm trying.
Please don't be normal, Bridget. Don't be normal, please.
I might fool some people now and again, but there's not much normalness happening.
You're very charming, which helps a lot. But then also, like, my one of my teachers back in Holland would always say, like, the doors of Aldi still need to be able to register you enough that they will open. Like if you go to the supermarket and the supermarket is just like, nah, then you've gone too far up.
Yeah, but I think it's just knowing our role, like if you're a person where that's an interest and you have an inclination to do that stuff, it's probably only going to be helpful for all the people around, and then just seeing it as like, okay, sure, I accept that that's something
but
about me.
Isn't that funny though, that just accepting the inclination is one of the hardest things. Like I've been really coming across, so I've these brilliant people here, I might as well just use it to my own advantage. No, I'm joking, but what I'm really running into, and Anthony made me aware of this, is that the space I'm trying to step into right now has some aspects where I'm going to have to be really seen. And I just didn't realize how uncomfortable I am with that, even though it's a very natural inclination. Like I find it quite easy to hold space. And
I think it's natural for you to be seen. Like
but I judge it. I judge the fuck out of it. But then and then now I've been trying to practice just being like, okay, I'm here, I'm visible, and I'm going to be visible, and I'm going to stand for my little bit, whatever it is. And what really surprised me, so there's a lot, not to make it like it's a bit abstract the way I'm saying it now, but there's a few levels to it. But I think the main thing is also I'm just trying to stop working just for money and actually trying to fulfill more of a purpose. So I'm stepping more into music, podcasting, maybe a bit of healing as well, space holding, that kind of thing. But it's funny, like my mind even starts to shut down when I'm trying to go into space. But I'm gonna try and do it. So give me a bit of time.
Heart chakra slightly to the right.
Yeah. We're here. So last weekend, it really felt like, okay, I'm starting to step into this, and I had like a heap of music gigs that I wanted to go well, and they all went brilliantly. And then I was so sad afterwards, and I was like, oh fuck, does this mean I'm doing the wrong thing? But then I was like, no, I'm really sad that I wasn't stepping into who I am for such a long time. Which is such a strange feeling to have. Instead of going, nice that you're stepping into yourself more and owning whatever space you're holding or whatever. I don't even know what the word for it is, but whoever you're slightly more meant to be or inclined to be, that's great. But no, there was a real grief of like, there was a lot of not doing that. Yeah. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think every time we expand into more love, because it's more truth, there's a grieving process for all the times that we weren't. And I think, anytime we transform, a different version of us kind of dies or we let go of. So grief is always parallel with transformation, with more love, more truth, more ourselves. It's like there's such a paradox that we live in, It's like never things are going to be like, I've arrived and it's perfect, it's great. It's like, no, if you want more love in your life, you're also going to feel more rawness and more fear. The more you step into, being seen, it's like, it's going to bring up more of the fears or more of the unprocessed stuff that you haven't yet. Yeah. One thing I'll offer, if you're open to it.
You're very open. I say now before I've heard it yet.
Well, when you said you heard you judging yourself, the question that came was who? What part of you? Which you is judging? Yeah. And separating that out.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But it can be a nice
it's a good question. Yeah.
We have to keep practicing that, because even it's like we know, and sitting in that, which part of you do you want to embody and
100%. I'm only saying I know because I don't want to say it on the podcast, but I think, but that's very valid, and I'm gonna.
But it's something we can all do in so many moments. Like I think I'm gonna, and then stop and I say, who's
doing this? That's
all those voices in my head, you know. It's and to be clear, not actual. I don't have actual voices in my head, but more often when I see me judging myself, which just sounds like my own voice, when I really sit in stillness and say, well, okay, where do I feel the truest part of me? Maybe it's here or my belly, wherever. Oh, that voice is coming from outside. Like that sentiment, that judgment, you know. Yeah, it's just a never-ending practice, I think.
But thank you. That's a great question, because even when you said it, and I said I know, it wasn't like a deflection. I actually was like, oh yeah, okay, that's a very good question, because I can see clearly. It's nearly like you see that heart flame, and I just see that thing beating on it from the outside, and I can see where it's coming from. It's just like, not for public consumption. Yeah. That's the only thing. Sometimes you have to draw the line. Well,
I've been reading a book at the moment about different types of spiritual awakenings. I can't remember the author's name. I'll try to find it. But she talks about how one aspect of it might be the awakening of something she calls the destroyer. And it's basically, and it's at quite a deep level. It's when you're like fairly far along in living your authentic self, whatever that might be, and there's just a little part of you that's like, destroy it all, kill all the happiness, you know, everything you've accomplished, you know, your true self. No, go lie down in a hole somewhere, and, you know, drink half a bottle of whiskey or something like that. And I think that's a very dramatic way to say it. But I definitely sometimes feel that. And now whether that is an internal voice, whether that is a natural process that just deserves to be overcome, almost like sharpening a blade or something like that, whether it's voices from childhood or whatever it is. But I definitely think the concept of like the destroyer, that part of you that just wants to wreck things, you know, and I think it's important not to judge that either. It's just a part. It's there for a purpose. But I definitely feel it sometimes.
I feel it in you sometimes too.
Don't know what you're talking about.
And I can see it in your eyes.
Yeah.
By the lights of all your burning boats, as we say.
Yeah, I think that's where meditation practice can be really helpful, of just seeing, because we can get so caught up in when a part of us is maybe acting up the destroyer, of not feeling like, oh, this is just emotion that's arising and it's just energy moving. And we become it, you know, it's like, this is true. I don't like that. You know, we get so like attached, entangled, ensnared with just rising energy. It's like kind of just actually a part of the process, right? Like I know that for me, it's been a bit more now. I was hiding off in my monasteries and in little villages with these
people who completely
women.
Understand.
And just they were cocooning me. They were kind of my solace, and now I can feel different people kind of like, it's time to come out and share that. You know, I didn't do all this so I could just feel good and know that other people are going through. I'm sure there are people going through what I went through 3, 5, 7 years ago, whether it was the unfulfillment in career or difficult relationship, or I had health things, and it's okay. I've resolved it for me. It's only natural, I think, as a human to then want to just kind of do this. I feel even just from my arms, just like, oh, I just want to give it to people. Like, this is possible for all of us. But then this ego comes up, and it's like, who do I think I am? I don't know enough. I'm not good. And that's ego too. You know, mine is not thinking necessarily so much, oh, this is going to be so great. For me, it's more the fear. But it stops me from doing something that's so pure and so natural and so true, of like, yeah, sure, I can write this story down for people or share this practice I learned. And it's really interesting because we talked about this a bit last night. Like, ego, we associate it so much in stories with this big inflated person who thinks they're so great, but actually ego's the destroyer. Ego's the one that's scared. Ego's the one that doesn't let us feel the feeling, because it's, I don't know, it's just, I guess, scared, or it's just so like me, so focused on.
Maybe it doesn't want change as well.
And I think it doesn't like change. And I think when we come to that other part of us, that's just like, in our body, connected to nature, and just like, oh, it's so natural that you want to, I don't know what the project is you're stepping into, but it sounds like where it's coming from is just this natural expression of your being that's only going to help people. Even if people receive it and hate it and think you're horrible, it might be the confidence boost they need to do their thing. So it's perfect still. You know, it's like, we don't need to get so caught up in how things are going to be received or what's going to happen, because we never know. Well, anyway,
the fascinating kind of flip side of the authentic coin is expression, right? Like you said, you can do all this work and be very happy in yourself, but for you, feeling like that on top of in a monastery in the Himalayas is not the full picture. You know, there's the acknowledgement of your authentic self, and then there is the expression of it. You know, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because in the Wuxing, the 5 phases or 5 elements model of Chinese medicine, the organ of expression is the lungs, and that's the element is metal, and it's lovely because obviously the way we share our inner world with the outer world is primarily through our lungs, right? You inhale the outer world and you gather your thoughts and your emotions and you speak them out, you know? Like we're literally breathing the same air here. This is why I love recording around the table like this. But the metal element is associated with death and the harvest and autumn. And the thing about metal, so the 5 phases are wood, fire, earth, metal, water. And the attributes of metal is that it flows and sets, okay? You can use metal to make tools, right? Like imagine you want to make a tool. Are you going to choose wood or metal? You know, you can't really craft wood. You can subtract from it. But metal, you can melt it down and forge it into any form. You can make it sharp. You can make an axe. You can make a scythe. Then you harvest, you know, whatever you're harvesting. And all those plants die in order to provide food for the winter, and are then reborn in the spring. And I think that's amazing because there is a little death when you express, right? When you're like, I am now authentic and I'm happy with the authenticity that lives inside my chest. But as soon as I express that out, I can't control what other people are going to do with it. You know, you have to really relinquish control and you have to acknowledge what comes back into you. And yeah, and when you're talking about like reforging, like I do think of us being like melted down. Like metal can be reforged, but it takes a lot of heat, right? Like if you're going to melt a hammer down and make it into a chisel, you're going to need a lot of heat and a lot of pressure. It's not going to willingly do that. But life does create these crucibles for us, these little blacksmith forges where we are forced to change or die. And really they're kind of the same thing. You know, it's all transformation. So yeah, authenticity is, we want consistency to be part of authenticity.
But maybe
it isn't.
It can't be.
You know?
I was listening to a yoga teacher, spiritual kind of guy from Holland, Tank Dauber, really lovely guy. And he does like little YouTube clips. And he had a thing this morning about opinions are like farts, you know, the stronger they are, the more they smell or something, you know. It was a bit silly, but it kind of resonated with me because he was like, God, we're all clinging on to these opinions, but haven't we all changed our minds all the time? So maybe we just let go of our little opinions, you know, which they're
so fickle, you know, emotions too. And
they're so fickle. And sorry, you were going to say something, Bridget. Go on.
No, I think we can get so attached to we need to build an identity around certain things that are just part of the human. We've all felt anger. We've all felt grief. Yeah. But we can kind of be like, I'm the tough one. I'm the angry, you know, that's my friend who's always this way. It's like, we all have the potential to do great things. We all have the potential to lie and betray somebody we love or make a mistake. And I think, so authenticity is an interesting thing because it's like, I just noticed the more I traveled too, like kind of who I am when I'm here in Ireland and being a part, you know, we naturally become a part of the community, the room that we're in. It might be a little different than when I'm in Mexico, just the parts of me that are more active and alive, but I don't feel less me in either place. You know, it's just kind of like, okay, different parts are coming up. And for me, so much of how I express, it's about like, you know, building the bridge between me and the person in front of me. So if a little baby comes into the room now, we're all going to shift 100%. And just, you know.
Could you sit a bit closer to the mic, please?
Or, you know, someone who maybe just lost someone, the version of you, the what you might embody might shift. And so I think we never fully exist as one thing. It's always like we're so interdependent. Who we are it depends on what's happening around us also. It's not this like fixed static thing, but yet we love to make it a fixed static.
Well, also because we need some consistency, I suppose, to be in the world, I think. So, because I think what you're both speaking to is completely correct, and that all those parts, for instance, that I would hold on to are in a way fictitious. But then again, what would it be like if I only existed in my purest form? Would people be able to interact at all in this world? Maybe they would. I don't know. But what did you said something just before we started, which I really liked. You were saying you weren't interested in rules, but you were interested in integrity.
Yeah, like I think, because there's always different rules of engagements in different places, and I think in morality and righteousness and rule, it can be so rigid, and sometimes actually people get hurt in the context of rules, is what I was learning. Sometimes you break a rule if you truly have integrity, like I want what's good for all beings. Maybe this rule doesn't make sense in this context. Like, to a kid, maybe you lie to protect them from something that's harmful. So lying is maybe against the rules, but the integrity is like, I'm here to kind of be a loving and a source of safety and whatever for this person. I think we can all think of so many examples where, the rule says this, but my integrity is saying, and I think now, especially with the political environment, it's a really important time to at least think about that. Like, the rule might be this, but I know there's a knowing, but where does that knowing come from? Is it, I was always told this is what makes me a good girl growing up, versus like, I know the right thing to do right now is to speak up, even though the good girl is always really quiet and just goes along and whatever. But actually, I need to say the thing that person's not going to like to hear. Yeah. But that's truly being in integrity with myself, a value of love, of honesty, of care for another. And I think that also, it connects kind of to, it's like, which part of us are we living into or feeding into when we make those decisions,
And the interesting thing about rules is that they're external, right? It's like, do this, do that. I mean, for integrity to be a counter to those rules, integrity can't be fixed, because if integrity was fixed, it just becomes another rule, doesn't it? So integrity is this fluid, internal, personalized thing. Like you said, you treat a kid one way that you might treat an adult, that you might treat somebody who's recently bereaved. And again, we need to relax a little bit, maybe, and not hold so much onto this and that.
And I think it's interesting what you're saying about political context, is that one of my friends recently said to me, when we were talking about politics, and he said, "You're such a contrarian." And I was like, that's it. He's nailed it. Because I've such a tendency to, if people are like, I'm on this side, I will go that side. If you go, and I think the reason behind is that I'm always like, look at the other thing that we're not discussing, because that speaks to me, probably, I don't know if it's exactly integrity, but it speaks to that higher order principle, maybe, rather than what we're actually nitpicking about, you know?
Yeah.
So I quite like that word, like the contrarian. I was like, I can see that. Always when people are like, no, well, this is definitely what we all feel. I'm like, sorry.
And the contrarian could just be expanding the options for people. It's not about actually changing their mind, but just like putting more space in the room.
Have you seen that? Way. Exactly. Yeah.
It's kind of what you said before. I wanted to speak to like the kind of some consistency in our way of being. There's this book called The Seed of the Soul. Jay-Z says it's one of his favorite books. So Oprah, I heard her talking about it. And the way they summed it up is like, if you can get your personality to serve the soul rather than them being at war with each other or conflicting, but just allow the personality to come through to still be in alignment and integrity with what's true for us. And I think a lot of it's choice, like I can choose, do I want to step into spaces and be more like a protector and allow her this, or just this loving present, I think we can all choose what we live into, and then we just practice it. We just make more neural pathways that show up in that way. But the persona and personality and the way we deliver deeper things, like, being a loving presence, or just being fully present, or offering clarity to a space. If, what we really value can come through in so many ways, and it will look different based on all the context. But it's like we can know there's a deeper truth there, a deeper sense of self that's beyond just personality. but not rejecting it, like marrying the two, letting them be together.
I was talking to somebody who I hope will be a guest on the pod this season, and I was trying to explain to them what we're doing here. And I was like, it's not an interview. We don't interview people. We bring them on to have a conversation about a topic. And I was like trying to, because it wasn't so clear in my head, like I really feel that that's important, but I wasn't really sure why. And I was trying to explain it to them, and I was like, look, if I interview you, I'm going to ask about, hey, that thing you did 3 years ago, tell me about that, or this thing that you're going to do next month, tell me what's this about, what's going on. But I was like, if we bring a topic, it's about you now. Like if we talk about authenticity, it's what authenticity means to the three of us, between the three of us today, you know, rather than what is your opinion on. And the potential guest just texted back straight away, and she was just like, oh, I get it. I really believe you're under no obligation to be the same person today that you were yesterday. You know, and that's why, yeah, I think we're kind of feeling into this. I think we made some choices about the format of the pod before we really knew why we were making them, and I think that's one of them. I think having topics are much more alive than opinions.
Yeah.
You know, and the space between us where you can twist and turn something and look at it from different angles and maybe go down a few dead ends, and that's all good too, you know. I think that's really important, rather than be like, this is where it is, I'm an expert, listen to me and I'll tell you.
Yeah.
You know?
And I've always loved, like you say, that space is so nice. There was a thing, maybe I mentioned it before, I was once watching an interview with Scottish comedian Billy Connolly, and he was giving out about the Catholic Church, I think. And he was like, and with the silly hats and blah, 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 blah. And he was like, it's fucking juju is what it is. But I also love that. And he went into why he'd gone into, with some Native Americans, gone into a sweat lodge. And he was like, and he's like, I just love that. I love that he was all in the one side. And then he just goes, also, that was all bollocks. I love it, you know. So, which I don't know. I love that spaciousness. I think it frustrates me when people are so set in something, because I am that too. Yeah. You know, it frustrates me because I had a thing this week with someone who was a bit angry with me for some opinion I held, and I was like, Jesus, that's a bit fucking daft. That has very little to do with me as a person. But then I was like, yeah, why is this annoying you, Bart? Well, first of all, because I want everyone to like me, but also because I do that too. So, I mean, hopefully less and less as we go on. But
I think the levity too, like that, just being able to laugh at the whole thing. You know, I can, a lot of practice and things that we get into, but at the end of the day, when you can just kind of zoom out a bit and like laugh at it all. I mean, it's hilarious, the things that we do, like the way we judge or who I think I am. You know, even when I look at me like 10 years ago, like the story I had about who I'm a teacher, and then
you were so successful.
Like, it's kind of funny. It's like, oh, that's what I thought was happening.
Laughter is such a great medicine for it.
And that's what I love about Ireland. I think I love being here, and you know, I am in a Buddhist center practicing, but there's just this kind of hilariousness to the whole thing. Like a lot of the Irish, you know, we did one day, there was a puja and there's fire and this and that, and I went up to dinner and this guy said that, he's like, Jesus, that was some crack, wasn't that? They're doing that. But it's, you know, from one perspective, it's a very serious, important, there's a lot of meaning, and someone came from India, you know, to do this, and he's like, Jesus, some crack. Are we going to the pub tonight? And, you know, the crew went out after, and it was like, oh yeah, both. Yeah. Both at the same time, and like do your practice fully and seriously, and take it seriously while you're there, and then step back and go into town and just have a chat. Like let it integrate, you know? Yeah. And I think there could, like an authenticity in that, of just not getting too carried away with any which direction we get pulled in.
100%.
But letting it all just kind of flow and kind of be a little bit funny.
You just have to laugh, like, and you have to, because some of it, like, I love that. I love all spiritual teachers. If people can't laugh, it's not good.
Yeah, it's very hard to be around it, isn't it? It's very intimidating, because I think what allows for space, I think, is a great question worth asking. And I think when there's humor, when there's no judgment, when it's like, just be, you know, it's okay to be a mess. Like you guys with me, I don't know how to do a podcast, but it was very like, we'll just have a chat and come on, and it can be terrible. There's no, it just allows space to, okay, let it be what it's going to be. And there's, you can be laughing, cry, whatever happens in the space.
100%.
It doesn't matter so much. It just comes through, you know? Just life living itself through us.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah. And I do think that's a great thing in Ireland, is that there's always that levity, and it can be really small little what would you call, like ornamentations on a story or little things. You just go, oh, that's hilarious. But yeah. Also, I think like it really helps to take your medicine in a way as well. Like I'm just thinking, this thing keeps coming back to me now, where a teacher of mine in Holland, he would always say, or still says, like, I'm just gonna saw at all of the legs under your chair until you're free. And then he laughs like, it's gonna fucking suck, you know. But it's kind of like that's great, because it's a beautiful paradox, and it's true, and but also we're laughing at it. I don't know.
The path to where we want to go doesn't always feel good, you know.
Oh no.
That I'm being reminded of is, you know, you saying stepping into more things. Yeah, it doesn't. Well, it's funny. It's like it can feel really great and not great at the same time, right? It's like feeling that excitement and that like, oh, there's something really here. Yeah. It's like equally comes kind of these other
It's
feelings.
Always both sides, and it's always kind of being aware of that. I was just thinking when you were saying, I've been thinking a lot about like national identity for the last while, where I've been thinking like, I'm a Dutch man living in Ireland, blah, 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 blah. But then so many people are like, you just said to me, like, oh, you feel very Irish. And there's part of me, my ego probably, that really likes that. That's like, oh, that's good. But then I'm like, yeah, but do you need, you know, do I need to, like, for you, that's just an observation. That's fine. But then I'm like, oh, you like that, but do you need to really invest more into some created persona or something? So I think it's always, that's the uncomfortable bit, because it'd be really nice for me to go, yeah, fucking yeah, you know, but I can't anymore because I know that's bollocks as well, you know, like in a way. The observation isn't bollocks, but the me holding on to it is, you know. But
and it shows just how, like, what does that even mean to be Irish, to be Dutch? It's like when you're just being yourself. I think maybe it's that. Maybe you just have a good degree of authenticity, and this is where you are right now. So you just feel a part of the place. It's not even really about... Because I mean, when I think of any country, Mexican people, Irish people, there's a million ways to be an Irish person, a Mexican person. And sometimes people say to me, oh, you don't seem American. I'm like, well, what do you think American
what does that mean?
Is?
Because even America is such a diverse place.
I'm just another version of it that you haven't maybe met yet. You know... But yeah, it's like, how much do we hold on to these?
But it's also funny because I never think about it with other people. Like, I'm never like, oh, there they go again. Well, I always joke about the Germans, but that's just the Dutch thing we have to do. You know, it's like the Irish and the English. So I was like, fucking Germans, but I have lovely German friends. Sorry, guys. But
the more you say that, the less true it is.
I know. And is it true? Or have I got something in store, a plan? No, but that was very dark, sorry. No, but it's, sure, they love a good plan over there. This is what people always say about me. He's got his shovel and he's just gonna keep digging a big hole for dig up. Yeah, sorry, for fuck's sake, dig up, man. Get yourself out of it instead of always into trouble. But no, what I was gonna say is that I never think about, oh, that person is so and so, and that has any particular value. I look at them as people. Why can't I fucking do it for myself? You know. But that's that weird thing that we're always. It's so easy to look at it. There was something you were saying there where I was thinking it, like, whereas it's so easy to look at you and go, fucking brilliant. You know, but then you look in the mirror and you go, there's that guy again. It's an odd thing, isn't it? It's a bit like that I heard someone say, like, look after yourself as if you were someone you're caring for. It's so odd. Yeah. So odd that we're that way.
Yeah, like, how do we get like that? There was actually the Dalai Lama was teaching to a group of Westerners, and they were asking questions about self-esteem. And, you know, they're translating for him, but he actually couldn't understand. He was like, what?
Oh, that's gas.
Do you mean?
Yeah.
And it's just interesting being in other parts of the world. Like, I spent a lot of time in Tibetan settlements in the Himalayas, and they're just such a lightness and a warmth. But you could see these people are not at war with themselves either. And the way it came across, like, I was invited into every home and just so well taken care of. But you could see where, compassion for other and compassion for self was inseparable. And what I've learned too, I was a teacher for many years, and I was in my 20s, and I was messy and had a lot of unprocessed, whatever from my life was unprocessed. But I was like, okay, I want to be helpful to young people in the world, so I'm going to be a teacher. And I could be really compassionate and loving and caring with the kids, but it was coming from not a well-resourced place. So by the end of 6 years, my adrenal glands were failing. Then coming and learning a lot of these practices, like self-compassion is big in Tibetan Buddhism. I think in all branches of Buddhism, you do that for yourself as well as for others. And then you realize, oh, it's coming from a different place. It's not really coming from me, Brighid, but it's just like, oh, if I have access to the feeling of compassion, it's really not different if I'm sharing it with you or myself. It's just kind of embodying it in the moment. And I think it's also this ego thing where we can be really kind of self-abusive and at war with ourselves with the ego, where
it's insane.
Yeah, it stops us from just being very natural. Like, it's actually quite natural to like drop something, make a mistake, and be like, okay, it's okay, we'll fix it. Give yourself a little moment the same way you do for someone else. So yeah, it's a really interesting thing, and I think we have to practice it, like learn how to do it. I think in Ireland that's quite strong too for people. I just get into a lot of conversations with people at the center and what they're going through in their mind. So much of it is very guilt and shame, and like it's like turning these, really negative emotions back on the self.
Yeah, and if you see the things that people say about themselves or do to themselves, you're like, if they were doing it to anyone else, you'd call the police, or at least have a very strong word with them.
I was just going to say that one of the saddest things I find with my patients is that they're often going through these things where they feel like they can't ask for help and they have to process them internally, and they feel very alone. And like in my head, I'm like, you're the fourth person that came to me today with this story. Yeah. You are so not alone. Like whatever you are going through, like we all think we're the stars of our own story, right? We all think that like, and this isn't to minimize anyone's experience, but to be like, nobody has ever experienced like this thing I'm feeling. Oh my God, this is so dark and so difficult. And, this has never existed, but like read a book, read a myth, like especially listen to a song, like, these are archetypical. If the more powerful the experience, the more likely it is to be an archetypical and therefore a shared experience. So if you can show a bit of compassion to yourself and then like open that valve between the inner and outer worlds and actually be like, I'm actually feeling this right now, that's a bit of an act of self-compassion as well, is to acknowledge it and not to bottle it, to like unscrew the cap of that bottle. And like, there will be people around that can relate and maybe help, but I think there's a bit of a link between self-compassion and locking yourself off from the world as well. And I think that's maybe what you were talking about, Brighid, that compassion for self is compassion for others, is that because we are interdependent and interconnected.
Or I guess it's like, how do you really share it with another? I think I had this idea, it's kind of like that savior complex almost, or the missionaries, where you can't do it for yourself necessarily, but you're going to go out and fix and help everyone else. You almost avoid yourself. Or this is what I did. I avoided myself for sure by looking at everyone else's issues, and they're just kids. I can help them. Oh, look, not everything's perfect here because I'm helping the kids. Yeah. And, when I came back to going on my own journey, it was like, oh, there's a lot of messes. There's a lot of tending to inside here. And if I do that, then my presence can just be an offering. It's like, because it's not about for me or you. It's not, it's just compassion lives here. Joy lives here. Love lives here. So it lives in me and around me, but then whoever is there, so I can go back to the classroom with the kids, and those things are just present in the room if I'm truly every day choosing to practice that and not seeing it as like, okay, I'll just do I'll kind of put on the loving thing for you right now because you're a child and you need that, but not truly it being just like integrated into my way of being.
And the child's nervous system is going, there's something wrong.
They know,
There's something hidden here. Even if you are, like, you probably are genuinely being loving towards them, but there is something wrong because you're hiding. Like, I saw a really funny clip online, actually, of a cat, like a little kitten from an, what do you call it, an orphanage or whatever. Anyway, just having shit time, brought into the world, all horrible, and you could just see it was just, like, completely anxious. And then this cat comes in just to sit with it. The cat's just really fucking chill, and it's just like, we're gonna co-regulate. I'm sure cats don't call it that. Meow regulate, probably. Thank you. But it was like, it's such a silly example, But it made it really clear for me, because you could just see the little kitten going and kind of fucking batting at the cat, and the cat's just like, yeah, whatever, I'm here. I'm just going to be here, and I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to respond to you. I'm going to make sure you don't like chew my ear off or something. But and it was so beautiful, because you could just see them, the whole situation calm until they're both just there going, this is nice. Yeah. But then imagine if that big cat was kind of like, yeah, fine, but then also fucking clawing at itself or whatever. That
well, they'd
picture,
fight, wouldn't they?
Yeah, well, that too. Like, and they get so fucking triggered by the kitten or something. But I know it's a really silly example, but it made it so clear to me that, like, yeah, obviously it doesn't work if I'm not loving towards myself.
Yeah, and I wonder, it's cool if we could show up like that as humans. I think I've actually seen this video of the two cats. But it's amazing how, because I learned this, I worked with kids with heavy trauma. I mean, some of them were just being held up at gunpoint walking to and from school, or had been removed from really abusive homes. It was very intense. But they were kids, so there was this ability in me, when they come in, they'd be acting kind of outrageous, like maybe saying something really outrageous directed at another kid or at me, or throwing it, you know. To me, it was like, that's just a child. It was like, this is their trauma acting outside of them. So I noticed sometimes they would just set me off, and I'd be like, my nervous system, and then it would just inflame, right? Yeah. But there was every now and then moments, especially, you know, we're not supposed to have favorites, but it was a kid I really had a connection with, or their mother and me were quite close. It was like I could go past the wild thing they were doing and just meet them in that place of like, you're a good little kid, you're just hurting right now and you don't know what to do with that energy. So every time, like when I could see them there, they would come also. And they would kind of let go of, they could then see themselves that way. Now, I'd love to say that's what I was doing. It was just moments that I got to realize, like, oh, and other moments, I was inflaming them even more because I was triggered. Yeah. And I think that that's a really cool thing that different practices can do, or just choosing who we want to be. Just being, we don't have to figure out so many methods if we can really be in our own nature and just see that in another. Like, even if you're having whatever kind of day, if I could be like, okay, have your day, do your thing, but I actually still see the best part of you while I'm seeing this behavior and this state of being and this emotion coming through you. I can also meet you there. It's like, I think people just settle when they know that part of them is being seen.
I'm getting the strangest memory, and I'm not actually sure what the connection is, but I was at a martial arts seminar up in Dublin, trained this thing called Budjikan, which has a bit of weapons work, and we had a teacher come over from Spain, and this guy, he actually teaches like police officers in Spain how to these kind of martial arty self-defensey things, and he's actually come up with a protocol for nurses that work in like mental institutions, because there's a big thing in this martial art about subduing people without hurting them, and a lot about weapons work as well. And he was teaching us knife work. So we had these little wooden tantos, these little wooden knives, daggers. And I remember I got a chance to work with him. And in this, I had the tanto, I had the fake knife, and I was meant to attack him, and he was unarmed. And like you get a bit hyped up, particularly in weapons work. This is something I've always found in martial arts. Like something there, my teacher used to call them a force escalator. As soon as you have a weapon, everything gets a bit fiery and everyone goes a bit harder and stuff like that. And I'd been training with somebody who we trained quite hard together. So then this Spanish teacher came over and he's like, okay, now attack me. And I just looked at him, and all that aggression just left my body because like I saw how he moved, and I was like, oh my God, if I attack this man with a knife, I'm just handing him a knife. Like, he was so calm and so competent. It was like, I knew in that moment I could go at him with absolutely everything I had, and he would just completely neutralize it. And all of a sudden, my body, my nervous system just went, and I was like, oh. And it was actually kind of relaxing. It was very neutralizing, is what I'd call it. And, you know, that's a very extreme version of that presence, but it is always interesting where you can find people who hype you up, where your nervous systems like spark off each other, right? And that can be quite creative and stuff as well. That isn't necessarily negative. But to find somebody who's like so still that you can feel that stillness at a distance, and just you feel those emotions just, and not like fear. It wasn't fear that entered my body. It was just waveform cancelling out. It was very interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing what we can offer one another. But it's like about embodying it, I think, We've been talking about different facilitators and experiences, and I think it's so important, to be really aware, like when we're holding space in a formal way, like a workshop, a class, but even just if we're on the bus or if we walk into a room, like what energy we bring in there really impacts the whole space, So it's a nice thing to be mindful of and to have practices to cultivate, or even just awareness of choosing. Because sometimes we do walk in and our job is to be the spark and be really like set things off. And I know I can sometimes be that, especially for family or in the pub. It's like, you want to have a fun night? Let's go. I can go there.
What I felt off you at Omega as well.
Like sometimes that's very much. And sometimes it is really this calm or like, whoa, everyone's already bring it down, and just, harmonizing with the room. It's a nice way of being present.
Yeah, and it's just that awareness, because I think, I find it tricky when people only externalize. And it's only like, well, this is happening to me, that person's doing this to me. If there is no level of, what am I actually doing here? I find that's usually a tricky conversation,
Yeah. Well, Brighid, thank you for bringing your energy into this space. It's been lovely. Thank you.
It's been really lovely. It's been very different. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm quite calm. I'm not gnawing at the side of the edge of the table like I normally am at the end of the pod.
Yeah. Yeah, we really need to get a carpenter in here.
Yeah, we do. Or just buy me a chew toy or something.
Oh no! Sometimes something just gets downloaded into your head straight away, and I have that now. That might have to go into your wedding speech.
Yeah.
But I think for a topic being authenticity, it's felt pretty authentic.
That's good.
Thank you so much, Brighid.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you, guys.
This has been Weshtern Philosophy. Follow us on the socials at Weshtern Philosophy Pod. If you want to support the podcast, you can join our Patreon to help the show grow, or make a one-off donation via the Ko-fi link in the episode description. We'll be back next week with more chats and another topic. Slán.